first time I came here. Noah was over there. Abraham was over there. This is the way, you know, you grow up in the faith and you see the kids grow up and you begin to get older and older and you are known as Mr. Abba Kingdom. You know, it's one time I spent some time with Rehe Kanun and we would joke about things and I would try to get her goat on some occasions. And I remember one time she was lecturing and I said something about, I have a question, do you have any questions? Do you have any questions? And I said, yes, I have a question. But that's my publicity agent over there, by the way. I have a question. I said, doesn't it say in the writings that Baha'u'llah is the manifestation of God for all the kingdoms of God? And she said, yes. And I said, well then, isn't it possible that when we go to the next kingdom we will have NSAs, LSAs, he will also be the manifestation for that world, and obviously they're going to need him there too. And she said, Tony, if I go there and I find there are NSAs and LSAs, I'm going to have to go to the other place. You know, yesterday I told you about a dog I had that went out and got a job the other day. I also had a cockatoo, and I don't know if you know about cockatoos. They look like little parrots with a little feather sticking up here. And when I was a young boy, I would come home. I lived on a little farm in New Jersey, and I would come running home, and Sylvester, Sebastian, the cockatoo would be there, and he would very friendly, love me, and he would speak and say, hello, 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 hello. And then I would put him on my shoulder and tie a little string to his foot and put it to my pants loop, and we'd all dash off, all the kids, to the country store to get some ice cream. And the gentleman of the ice cream store always had a favorite remark. We'd all come rushing in for ice cream at one time, and he'd say, okay, just one at a time, gentlemen, one at a time, gentlemen. It was his favorite expression. And of course, old Sebastian here would take in everything, and you'd never know what he was going to say. And so one day I came home and I said to my aunt, who was there at the time, and I was staying with her for a while, and I said, where's Sebastian? Oh, she said, my God, I left the back door open, he must have gotten out. He had done this before and we'd retrieved him. But this time, not too far back of the house was a chicken coop. And the thing that was extraordinary about that chicken coop, we had just gotten in 3 bantam roosters. Now, if you know bantam roosters, they protect their hens. Anything that gets near them, they get jealous. And they had this poor Sebastian, he had flown right into the coop, and they had him in the corner over there. And they were pecking away at him, and he stood there with this one feather up, and all he was saying is, one at a time, gentlemen, one at a time. And I think that this is really the way we as Baha'is have got to operate, one at a time, take the problem, solve them, and get going. And you know, sometimes we make it very complicated. I remember, having been in India, I remember an Indian scientist that was there. He was an American scientist working on a Nobel Prize winner. He was a Nobel Prize winner. His wife was pretty much upset with the way the things were being done in India. And she had a servant who was putting a picture on the wall. And as he was putting the picture on the wall, of course, you know what happened. He was putting a nail in the wall, and the plaster was coming off the wall. And she got frustrated, and she said, let me have that hammer and nail. She said to this servant, this Indian servant, she said, why don't you use some common sense when you do this? And he rose up in all his dignity, and he said, madam, all I have is a technical education. Common sense is a gift of God. And actually, this is true. We have the common sense that we need to do this job, and we've got to use it. The other thing is that sometimes we don't realize the technological advances that have been made. We are living in an age of constant change. As I said, when I was born, and please, the flood had already occurred when I was born, but I was born in the age in which there was no electricity, in which there were no automobiles, they were just being invented, and all these things going on, and you have the age in which you have television, you have space, and I spent most of my life in the space program. I've written extensively in that field and been involved in it for a long period of time. And sometimes I began to find out what it means to live in an age in which change is the constant factor. For example, I remember being the public information officer for the faith, and some reporter from a national publication came in and he asked the question, well, why do you need, what will happen that the next manifestation will come? I mean, you've been telling me the reason they come is the thing gets messed up and then he has to come and straighten it out. And I didn't want to get caught in that trap. So I thought a while and I said, well, you know, we're going to have the Baha'i tells us there are life out in space and we'll probably be going to other planets and we'll discover things that will cause problems. We may go out there one day and discover that there's a planet which has intelligent alligators. And we'll go there and we'll make pocketbooks out of them or something. And, you know, people might say, would you want your daughter to marry an alligator, you know, and things like this. They have assemblies, the finally become great, you know, they just look like alligators, that's all. And he thought, well, that might be a good thing, that we have to then, some messenger of God has to come along and say, fools, the thing that makes you one with God is intelligence, because God has no form. And I remember giving this talk in a Jewish neighborhood, and I said, would you want your daughter to marry an alligator part, you know? And one woman got up and said, well, if he made a good salary, you know. I met an American Indian who I became very friendly with. And you know, Baha'u'llah said it will be the primitive, the people of the world that will lead us. And primitive is a thing that we put to them. They're not primitive. They have hearts that are way ahead of us. And he said something to me that is the essence of what we're doing now. He said, all this religion is good. But he said, spirit is good, but it has to grow corn. What good is religion if it doesn't help the people of the world? What good is it if it doesn't do something for them? And look at it. We are now engaged in a program in which, you know, all previous manifestations have come to save man. Baha'u'llah has come to save not only man, but society. They've been trying to change man in the past, which is important, but Baha'u'llah has added to that, changing the whole of society, the transformation of man and the transformation of a society. God is bearing down on us, someone said, in a new way, demanding new efforts and changes from us in a transformation. Are we heading towards a future, the way things look now, of a future in which man is suicidal? He builds atomic plants, but he doesn't know what to do with them, with its waste. Look at Chernobyl. He builds atomic bombs, and he doesn't know when he'll use them. This is the kind of world that we're building in. We live in a global village, but the tribes are still fighting. The space age is causing us a lot of problems, I know. I remember being at a seminar on the implications of space and the New Age. And there were Jewish rabbis, there were one Catholic bishop, and I was there representing the religion in general at the time, but of course being a Baha'i. And I remember the Jewish, we talked about what problems will this have for religion, and the Jews said, well, you know, the Jewish holidays are based on the lunar cycle, and if they have Jewish people living up on the moon, and they want to observe their holy days, they won't know what cycle the moon is in, so they have to have a constant communication with Israel to say what they are up there. But the one that got me the most was the one that was brought up by the Catholic bishop who said, in one of the discussions, it might be possible that we would come across a planet in the world, out in the universe, in which Adam didn't eat the apple. And as a result, there was no original sin on that planet, and we come over there to this particular planet, and they say, whoa, man, you're not going to come here, you got original sin. Our Adam didn't eat the apple. And so we are these little petty things, you see, get grown into us, and they begin to affect us even as we go out into outer space. We're changing in the faith. When I grew up in the early parts of the faith, there were mostly women. And all they would do is you would go to their houses and you would get tea and cookies. And I remember those days, I said those were the days of mass tea. Then we changed it to today with mass teaching. All we had to do is put "ching" on it, that Chinese word. And we changed it along that line. You think we got problems? Look at the problems the psychiatrists have got today. Someone said, he defined the psychiatrist. He said, we have problems that most of us are neurotic. We sort of dream of castles in the sky. And some of us are psychotic. We live in the castle. And the poor psychiatrists have got to collect rent on the castle. When I was, again, at the Public Information Office, we used to receive letters addressed to Dear Pastor. And the letters, we finally sat down and said, look, we don't have any pastors here, so we got to get a form letter to work out this question. And so what we did is we wrote a letter which would take care of the whole thing. We said, dear friend, your letter to the pastor has been noted. We wish to inform you we are not pasteurized in the Baha'i faith, we are homogenized. Also, my office, those of you who knew me at that time, was in the basement of the house of worship that had no windows. And people would come in, and I was in this place with no windows. You could see nothing outside. And they said, how could you stay down here, Tony? And I said, it's the faith that keeps me here. What do you mean, the faith that keeps you here? I said, it's what Baha'u'llah said that keeps me here. He said, what did he say about it? He said, don't fear a basement. So I did. Now, according to Marshall McLuhan, the famous Canadian philosopher, he says there have been three basic technological innovations, three things which have affected the history of mankind. He says the first is the phonetic alphabet which jolted tribal man out of his sensory balance and gave him dominance to the eye. In other words, he learned how to communicate. The second thing was the introduction of movable type in the 16th century, which accelerated this process. In other words, man could now take what he thought about, and he could pass it on to future generations. And he says the third thing is 1844. Because in 1844, the telegraph was invented, and it begins the electronic age, which will ultimately re-tribalize man by restoring his sensory balance. We're going back into the smaller group, the LSAs. And if you don't think that's a tribe, I won't go further. Baha'u'llah said in one of his pamphlets, every single letter proceeding from our mouth is endowed with such a regenerative power as to enable it to bring into existence a new creation, a creation the magnitude of which is inscrutable to all save God. We are seeing that creation coming into being, because the prophets are the agents of evolution for mankind. The human race is undergoing profound changes and is groping for a new guiding principles to lead it into a new and better world. Yes, we have some sort of order in the world today, but it's superficial order. There's no tranquility and understanding. We need to build, and quickly, as the time is short, a form and an abiding loyalty to mankind, a firm and abiding loyalty to mankind, to a world community. We must impress this on the hearts and minds of men and women. Only the right state of mind can bring about peace and unity and order. We need a new spirit to reconstruct this mankind. And what they forget, that there is a oneness. When Baha'u'llah tells us there is a oneness in everything in the universe, they keep forgetting that you and I are one in so many ways, and science is telling it. It says that we breathe about 600 breaths in a pound of air, and that good air has 78% nitrogen. There's a hard time getting that good air, but you do breathe 78% nitrogen gas and about 21% oxygen, and a breath weighs about 3/4 of a gram. Now, the number of nitrogen atoms in a breath is 2.4 times 10 to the 22nd power. It's going to run off this stage if I start putting all the zeros, or about 24,000 million. In a deep breath, there are 10 million times as many nitrogen atoms as people on Earth. There are 100 billion times more nitrogen atoms as there are stars and galaxies. We could be breathing at this moment because you're breathing out nitrogen and I'm taking it in. But the same nitrogen is here that was always here. So we could be breathing in the nitrogen of the atoms previously taken in by Shakespeare, by Jesus, by dinosaurs, by Baha'u'llah. We are one. We are one. We are one with the present, we are one with the past, and we will be one with the future. We live in an age in which we have broken free from the umbilical cord that has held us to Earth. We are no longer, this is a pregnant age, and it has given birth. But we have performed miracles. 300,000 people came together to work on putting the shuttle and the space program in there. But we can't get 300,000 people to work together to make better cities, to wipe out prejudice. But we have 100,000 people right here in this country, in the United States, that are going to take that job over. And it's going to be your mission to do it. Somebody said, we've been on the moon. We're planning to go to Mars. When are we going to get to Earth? Because we really haven't gotten to Earth to solve the problems that there are here on Earth. And let me talk about what we have as Baha'is the job to do. The job that we have to do is really a simple one, since we have the job of waking up the world and doing so many things. Now you notice that I started out in the world as a paper shuffler, and I still shuffle paper. Baha'u'llah is calling us to proclaim now, to work now for the peace program. It is now, he says, I need you. Tomorrow, when there are many Baha'is, he can say, who needs you? I can get all the Baha'is I want. Now we are the ones he can use. What will your child say in the future? Where were you, Daddy? Where were you, Mommy, when the peace message was out, and what did you do? What will you say? The Guardian says there are two kinds of Baha'is. There are those whose religion is Baha'i and those who live for the faith. There are people who put down, what's your religion, Baha'i? There are people who live their faith. And this is the kind we need today. Sometimes we don't realize our blessings, the miracle of now in which we live. To be a Baha'i is to grow, to be in history, to be summoned to a new creation. All around us are the signs of this. In a book on the year 2000, two nuclear scientists put this statement: the world is getting so complicated, the situations are so complicated, we can no longer depend upon fallible man. We need an infallible source. This is what the people are saying. They are saying the very words that Baha'u'llah gave us. Do you know the day in which you live? Do you understand life rather than have it happen like a random thing, a meaningless event? Look at life today. The churches are at a critical historical point because we're coming to this point in history where it's either go down one road or go down the other one. And the churches are at this critical point after having dammed up the process of reform for centuries. They've opened up the floodgates and are now being washed away in their own pollution. Baha'u'llah said to the Pope, he said, the time will come if you don't become the shepherd of mankind, people will not listen to you. You talk to 10 Catholic women and you say, are you taking the pill? And they say yes. And they say, why are you doing it? Why don't you listen to the Pope when he says, don't take the pill? And they say he doesn't know what he's talking about. This is the word that Baha'u'llah says would happen. This generation has no utopia. Its idea is the happening. Be concrete, be vivid, be personal, be now. Of the future, who is there? The Baha'is are the custodians of tomorrow. We were not chosen to be the children of God because we were any better. We were chosen to be the children of God because we are being given an opportunity to redeem ourselves, to redeem mankind, and to redeem the future generation so that it can have the things it should have to be truly human, and it will be the next step in evolution that they can become the spiritual beings that God has destined us to become. The Baha'i faith is a community, a world community chosen by God and confirmed in the blood of the martyrs and by a covenant. We are the people of God for this age. Don't let anyone else tell you differently. But we have many hang-ups. Our first hang-up is that we're too small. What can we do? 4 billion people in the world. So even if we are 3 or 5 or 6 million, what can we do against it? Do you know the difference between a million and a billion? If you count 3 numbers every second, 1, 2, 3, it'll take you 3 days without eating and sleeping to count a million. 3 numbers every second. 3 days. Never sleeping. It will take you 8 years to count a billion. Counting 3 numbers every second. That's without eating, sleeping, or anything else. We're too small. Elton Trueblooded, a noted Christian theologian, says the great problem of Christianity, and he uses this word, there are too damn many Christians who are not living up to their faith. He said, give me 25,000 Christians who will live up to their faith, and I will take over the world. In the Talmud, it says, in the Jewish Talmud, if one man, one living soul would live up to what God wants him to do, the whole world would be changed. Now there is a scientist by the name of Sheldrake in England who comes out with a theory of morphonic resonance, who says that whatever we do, we leave an impression on the world that affects future generations. That if we go to a place and we pray, and in a place and we do something, the next Baha'is that come in, the next ones that come in, it makes it easier. It almost goes fast. We leave an impression. You remember Abdul Baha said, if only I could walk here and leave my impression around the world. But you go, and you do it. What we do counts. It remains. It has an impression. Let me read you something from what Toynbee says in this particular case. It's really something when you begin to see that we do play a part and we are important. Toynbee's studies reveal that civilizations grow as a result of the activity and thought of the creative minority. We are a minority. We are creative. We live by the creative word. And that internal, not external factors were the basis of growth. In other words, it was the conclusion of the greatest historian of the 20th century that growth is determined by an individual initiative and creativity and not by focusing upon the will of the majority as exercised by government. Toynbee saw growth being realized by overcoming material obstacles which allowed greater energy of response. The masses initiated the experiences of creative minorities. They followed. Now, I hate to use the comparison, but 25,000 communists took over all of Russia. I'm not saying we're here to take over in that way, but spiritually, yes. You don't realize the power you have. What were you promised? There are promises. You take one step and the whole apart kingdom slams their feet on the ground and the echo will be heard around the world. We have a multiplying factor given to us by Baha'u'llah. Another problem, we try to live in 2 worlds. We're living out there in that world and the world that we're creating. And we're getting schizophrenic in many cases. You can't do it. The carpet will be rolled up, Baha'u'llah said, and a new one rolled out in its place. The main thing we've got to be worrying about is, are we standing on the carpet that's being rolled up? Or are we out there ready to roll out the new carpet, the new civilization? The Baha'u'llah is talking about it. The other thing is we don't live the life. We say, we have got to learn the lessons that Baha'u'llah has given us, that Abdul Baha has given us, the Guardian has given us, the Universal House has given us, about fellowship and love. Peace begins within the Baha'i community, and it works its way out. If they see us with peace, they will say, what is it? We want a piece of it. Love is the only strength which makes things one without destroying them. Sometimes when you put two things together and you fuse them, you lose them. We still got hang-ups. I think you had, unfortunately didn't hear the talk on the foibles of this age in the Baha'i faith. I was working with the youth. But we have hang-ups. We still have not gotten all the racial prejudice concepts out of our mind. We still don't like rutabagas. We still have it. But you know why I'm not worried? The Guardian said there are no Baha'is as yet. The only Baha'i was Abdul Baha. We're the pre-Baha'i. Because we bring with us everything, all the hang-ups, and our children will be the better Baha'is. I was talking to the youth and I said, you have one great advantage over your parents. You have less hang-ups than they have. And so future generations will become the real Baha'is. We have prejudices, intellectual prejudice. He went to college, I didn't go to college. Baha'u'llah took care of that when he sent a shoemaker to teach the leading Islamic theologian. Economic prejudices, I got more money than you got, and all this sort of stuff. And then the one that I hate the worst, I've been a Baha'i longer than you. and you can't do it that way because I tried it. Okay, the next point I think that's important in all of this is Baha'u'llah is doing one thing which to me, I look upon as one of the most important things in what he brought. Baha'u'llah is the savior of the family. Everything is trying to tear the family down. Now, a study was made by the American Institute of Family Relations, and it states in this study, no society has ever survived after its family life deteriorated. The extinction of faith in a familistic system is identical with the movements in Rome about AD 150. The change in faith and belief in family systems was associated with the enormous crises in the very civilizations themselves. A healthy family is not an option for a society. This is a report. It is a life and death matter. We can overlook this crisis for a generation or two. The undermining of the character of people takes time. Then it begins to accumulate and the symptoms of disorder appear on every side. The amount of mental disturbance throughout the society begins to rise rapidly. The reign of lawlessness penetrates to every corner of society. Vandalism becomes commonplace. Respect for authority in schools and family disappears. These are the signs of instability. They cannot be remedied so long as the family is uprooted and disordered. So one of the things that we as Baha'is have got to make sure is that we keep a viable family life. You know, one of the problems we have in this generation is that ours is a complex world. In many ways, it's a neurotic world, and one that is fast becoming an urban world. Our values are confused. We place great value on such things as deodorant. Success and status in the process suffer a loss of identity. One thing someone said, making a comment about our new civilization, At least it doesn't smell. Modern technology and society is creating the inhuman human. The mass man who has lost all reason for living in any sense of purpose. We must have a new sense of values in which such things as honesty, truthfulness, fellowship, concern are meaningful. The mass man tends to avoid this question. What is the ultimate value of a man's life? He avoids that question, and then we in America are truly blessed. We're truly blessed. Never in the history of the world has a nation achieved so much in such a short span of time. In a little over 200 years, we've become the wealthiest nation in the world with the highest standard of living the world has ever known. Nations from far corners of the world turn to us for aid and assistance. Many around the world hate us, but they respect what America stands for. They accept our aid and sometimes our leadership. But there's a great danger. Because of what we are morally vulnerable. The Bible says, to whom much is given, of him much is required. Our greatness in wealth and technology and military might and industry, all of this will be of no avail unless and until our moral leadership in human relations equals and surpasses those of material achievements. It is a sad commentary on our times that many, if not the majority of the people, do not truly practice in their daily lives those things necessary to achieve true brotherhood. We find many ways to deal with our bad conscience or race relations or human rights. We say that it is not our personal responsibility. It's not my job to take care of this situation. It's society's job. It's the government's job. We keep people of other races, other colors, other nationalities, even other religions out of sight. Our churches tell us to love our neighbors, so we make it impossible for him to be our neighbor. We say, go live somewhere else so we can live with a neighbor that's like us. We delegate the problem to the courts. We say, oh yes, we have a few problems, but in the main things are fine. We remain neutral. We condone. We are indifferent to evil. Some of us are definitely guilty, but all of us are responsible. And we have that. We have to be, you know, this year the Universal House of Justice sent a special message and said to us that we have to also remember Martin Luther King. And you know, Martin Luther King, Dr. Martin Luther King wrote, he said, love is treating fellow men as persons, understanding them with all their good and bad qualities, and treating them as potential saints. It is helping people with no thought of receiving anything in return. It is the willingness to go the second mile, to forgive the 70 times 7 in order to restore the broken community. It is facing evil with an infinite capacity to take it without flinching. This is what we're being told in all of this. Our job is to start building a world, a new world, before the old one is done away with. Before the pattern for the new world is socially acceptable. Don't you think that when we start talking about the new world, the federal world, the world together, that we're going to be attacked? Sure we are. One of the favorite things of the fundamentalists is they want one world government. Can you imagine that, one world government? We're all going to live as brothers and sisters. Can you imagine that great evil? Look at what happened when Adam and Eve lived together. Look at what happened to Abel and Cain. You can't live together as one world. You'll only kill each other. That's their way of looking at it. It's not going to be socially acceptable. That indeed is the job for saints. To work to build a new world when the old world is still here and the new world is not socially acceptable. We are the saints of the new world if we do our job. And saints, we may remind ourselves, we're not born to sainthood. They are just men and women who put their faith into action. The Guardian put it very succinctly. He said, the world is fed up with preaching. What it wants to see is love in action. It's recorded that St. Bernard, I don't mean the dog, although when I went up that to the hill for one of those classes, I wished I had that St. Bernard fully. But there was a saint by the name of Saint Bernard, and he used to place over his door of his particular monastery cell the inscription, "Bernard, why are you here?" Why don't we put it on our mirrors? We get up in the morning and say, "Why are we here?" My wife got up this morning and said, "Am I here?" But why are we here? So that every time he entered, he had to face anew the great purpose of his life. And that's what we're going to have to face, is the great purpose of our life. Living isn't living, and it's just a bore unless you live for something that's worth dying for, someone said. There's a lot of truism to that. At Baha'i, if we have eyes, we can see the signs of the times. If we have ears, we can hear the cry of the new generation. If we can feel the tension in the world. If we can smell the odor of death and disaster for civilization. And if we can touch and taste, we can taste the sourness of the words of today's leaders. All our senses can feel the need for the purpose of Baha'u'llah's healing message. And finally, because I know I'm beginning to run a little over, but they ran over me a little bit before. So, it's an eye for an eye. Turn the other cheek, he said. I used to do that when I went horseback riding. To be human, to be a Baha'i is to grow, to be in history, to be summoned to a new creation. And I'd like to close this particular session with a quotation from something from the writings which I think, to me, is the drama of it all. The message has been written. The words are there. The Baha'is are in place. The stage is set. The hour is propitious. The signal is sounded. Baha'u'llah's spiritual battalions are moving into position. The initial clash between the forces of darkness and the army of light is being registered by the denizens of the Abha kingdom. The author of the plan that has set so titanic an enterprise in motion is himself mounted at the head of these battalions and leads them on to capture the cities and men's hearts. The divine charger is impatient and can tarry no longer. Mount your steeds, O heroes of God. Thank you.